That big international drive to rebuild Somalia in a moment, but first we start with this remarkable human story. The faces of three young women stared out from missing posters around the city of Cleveland, Ohio for years. Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus and Michelle Knight each disappeared without a trace around a decade ago. They were presumed by many to be dead. In fact, they were being held captive in a house in the suburbs. And last night, Amanda Berry led their break for freedom. Paul Adams tells the dramatic story of the women's escape.
Jubilation last night as word spreads of something miraculous. Three women, long presumed to be dead, rescued and apparently well. The disappearance of Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus just a year apart traumatized the Cleveland neighborhood where both of them lived. Stunning then to hear Amanda's voice a decade later, distressed but free.
Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance?
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
Okay, stay there with those neighbors, talk to the police when they get there.
Okay.
Okay, talk to the police when they get there.
No, I need them now before we get back.
And they see this girl, and she just going nuts on the door. So I'm like, what's your problem? You stuck, just open the door. And she says, I can't, he got it locked. And I look how he has it, and it's only enough to reach a hand out to grab the mail and, close the door. And we, naturally gonna pry it open. That didn't work, so we had to kick open the bottom. Luckily on that door was aluminum, it was cheap. And she climbed out with her daughter. She went to my house, we called 911. All right, then when the police get here, she says it's three more girls up there.
The three women were being held in a house on Seymour Avenue, not far from the center of Cleveland, the very city where all three lived and disappeared. Michelle Knight vanished in 2002 at the age of 19. Amanda Berry went missing the following year on her way home from work. She was 16. And the youngest, Gina De Jesus, was just 14 when she disappeared. She was coming home from school. The police have arrested a school bus driver, Ariel Castro, and two of his brothers, accused of kidnapping and holding the women against their will. For the authorities, who pursued numerous leads over the years, there's a lot to understand.
We and our law enforcement partners continue to work shoulder to shoulder with the Cleveland Police Department to answer the many questions that investigators have. And rest assured, the FBI will bring every resource to bear to assist our partners in this case, to bring the full weight of justice behind those responsible for this horrific case.
Outside the house on Seymour Street, a mostly Hispanic community is stunned, wondering how they managed to miss the horror behind these shabby walls.
It looked suspicious because you couldn't see through the windows. It looked like plastic or board or behind plastic or something. And the door you couldn't see, it looks like plastic and crap around the door and wood. It didn't look right. But I never, none of us ever thought that something like that was going on in there.
And there was more tantalizing glimpses of a small child.
When I found out there was a little girl up there, that I saw her, I questioned it. They told me he shouldn't have a little girl because he doesn't have any women in there. So how would there be a 4 or 5-year-old in that house,
So you saw a small child there?
In the window, in the attic window. Last year in the summer, he would open it when he come back from his school bus route. He's a bus driver, a school bus driver. And he would open up that window and he would let the little girl look out the window.
The child, it seems, was born in the house, the daughter of Amanda Berry. This photo of the two of them was taken in hospital last night. Mother and daughter both said to be in good health.
Paul Adams there with that remarkable human story, and hopefully a new chapter opening for those three women and the daughter. But also a new chapter for a country this time. Somalia has endured decades of war, unrest and disorder. But is it on the brink now of change? It has a functioning government for the first time in 20 years, and a moderate level of security has returned to the capital, Mogadishu. Today there's been a major international conference right here in London aimed at rebuilding the country and convincing the world that it is open for business. It was hosted by the British Prime Minister David Cameron and his Somali counterpart Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, and raised $300 million for development. In a moment, we'll be asking Hassan Dudde from the Somali Economic Forum if investors really can be wooed into putting their money into the country. But first, Andrew Harding has this report from Somalia.
We're heading into the Somali countryside. Until a few months ago, all this territory was held by Islamist militants linked to Al-Qaeda. But today, the market town of Afgoy is peaceful. The locals trying to get used to something anarchic Somalia has not had for 20 years, a proper central government. When Shabab left, the new police chief tells me, the Islamists are gone forever. We will not allow them back. To that end, a national army and police force, heavily funded by the West, are taking shape. There is hope in the air. There's no doubt the security situation here has improved dramatically in recent months. This could be the best chance Somalia has had for peace in a generation, but it is not a done deal. Somalia, after all, is a broken country.
Young people, they don't have a job. They're jobless. They're doing nothing. They finish in high school. They don't have university. They don't have job. They don't have nothing. They just staying home and playing football. That's it. That's what's disturbing in my heart. I'm one of them, the young people.
And you have no job?
I have no job now.
And so these men, the Islamist militants of Al-Shabaab, continue to recruit and to attack. At the weekend, it was this bomb blast in the capital, Mogadishu. Some 30 civilian casualties. Somalia's new leaders are in London today asking for more money from Britain and others. Corruption is a problem here, but the West can't risk abandoning Somalia again.
Somalia has been off the track for the last 22 years. We are rebuilding Somalia. Therefore, the cost that we may ask may not be something small.
Outside, they're already clearing away the wreckage of the car bomb. This remains a dangerous country, but it has a new sense of purpose. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Somalia.
So how do you attract investors to Somalia? Well, Hassan Dudde runs the Somali Economic Forum. He joins me now in the studio. Welcome to the programme. This is a country where a lot of other countries, international donors, will have a very strong interest in securing it, quite obviously. But not only that, it has very strong potential from a business perspective, doesn't it?
It does indeed, it has. And Somalia being in a strategic position in Africa and in the whole the East Africa region, of course Somalia has a lot to offer. If I were to start with the natural resources that it has, although not so much talk is really about the natural resources, we are now currently talking about what are the existing businesses and things can investors actually invest in Somalia. So the booming sectors, of course, and they have a great potential would be the livestock, fishery, telecommunication, and so on. So really, there's endless to what you can do in Somalia.
And also a very strong culture of entrepreneurial activity.
Absolutely. Somalis are arguably the most active and influential, really, businesses in the whole Africa. In the whole of Africa, you find Somalis anywhere in the continent. You go to South Africa, there are Somalis running small businesses in East Africa, and we see them, those investors and business people coming back to Somalia. So this is also hugely diaspora driven.
Yes, I mean, you certainly, obviously, as a result of the conflict, and this is true for any country that is in prolonged conflict, you have seen a lot of Somalis elsewhere in the world. Do you see them now having a strong incentive not just to return their money, but to physically return as well and take part in this potential economic growth?
Oh yes, there are actually many cases and success stories. In fact, I will be talking about one of those at the Somalia Investment Conference tomorrow here in London.
Because the agenda moves from the more political and security-related issues towards business.
Towards business, and it's clearly understood that if you really want to help a country to stabilize, of course, economy is one big issue. Unemployment is so high in Somalia, and as you have previously seen, the young gentleman was talking about that. The rate of unemployment is so high. But let's not forget that the most, I would say, in most countries, you have the public sector that recruits. Now, that creates number of unemployment, number of employments. We don't have that in Somalia, so it's purely now dependent on the private sector. and that is where the opportunities are, of course. And if those private sectors are invested, and in my opinion, they have been underinvested and to an extent also unprotected. So that's where you could see a growth, an economic growth, and stability, of course, in the long run.
We saw Al-Shabaab saying that they felt that there was a Western grab here for resources in Somalia. Are they so significant that that provides a fundamental incentive, do you think?
Well, look, one thing for sure is that if you want to control a territory, you'll come up with any excuse to say that, you know, others are doing this and this is what we're going to do for, you know, for the country. But I would say so much is really currently, which something that we are really looking forward to and feel positive about, is the shift from the political focus and on the economy right now, and this is definitely will contribute to you know, coming and stability in Somalia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Well, to France now, back to the Eurozone. The second largest bank in France, Société Générale, has reported a 50% slump in profits in its first quarter results of the year. Now, a weak economy in France has depressed the demand for lending, clearly. To compensate, the bank is now cutting costs by $1.2 billion. Fellow French bank Crédit Agricole is making $850 million worth of cuts. It effectively marks the end of 2 decades worth of expansion for the French banking sector. Jeremy Howe reports.
This is a poor time to be a lender in France. The economy is set to slide into recession this year. Large factories are earmarked for closure. Thousands of employees are trying to protect their jobs. Many fewer people are prepared to take on more debt.
People probably prefer to build buffers, to pile on savings, rather than take more loans. And this is reflected in the situation in the housing sector, where house prices, after having nicely rebounded after the recession of 08 or 09, are now falling again. So definitely no appetite for mortgage lending, and not much of an appetite for consumer lending.
Soc Gen saw profits slide to $480 million from $960 million for the same quarter a year ago. He put tens of billions of dollars aside in provisions for bad debt. Crédit Agricole's earnings were up 50% on the same quarter last year, but this reflects the fact that back then it was writing off billions of dollars from the losses it made in the Greek financial crisis. French banks in general have seen their earnings under pressure, not only in retail banking, but also in investment banking.
Investors have to wake up to the new normal in European banking nowadays, which is that, yes, banks won't be able to make the profits that they had in the past because they're not doing the sort of risky business, for example, investment banking that they used to. That now they're focused on retail banking, which is more stable but has more modest profitability.
Soc Gen has placated its investors by announcing a $1.2 billion program of savings over the next 2 years, which will involve laying off some 600 staff. Crédit Agricole says it will cut costs by $850 million by the end of 2016. Branch closures will be one of the main measures taken. Analysts predict that across the board, French banks could shed 10,000 jobs in the effort to maintain their profit levels. Jeremy Howell, BBC News.
How does Europe's banking sector reflect the health of the economy? With me now is Brian Biggs, who's an analyst with Europe Economics, which is an economics consultancy. Welcome. So the French banks were considered to be potentially a burden to the health of the French economy. And so it's encouraging to see with them sorting out their balance sheets. And that's not just today. We've seen it with the other banks as well, that really that risk is now abating. Is that how you would see it?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, so the difficulty is the French banks and European banks more generally, I think, need to find some way to enter profitable business lines. So what they need to do is they need to encourage individuals to take up using their core services, which is lending for investment or for consumption, or also financial services and investment more generally. And so even though they're repairing the balance sheets, nevertheless, I think the underlying outlook for the banking business in general is starting to become, is a bit anemic at the moment. What they need to do is sort of bolster their core business lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's two-way, isn't it? That banks need to be healthy in order to be able to lend, but also there has to be the appetite there. They have to stimulate it.
Yeah, well, that's right. So what we're facing, though, are households aren't really interested in taking on any new debt, and equally, neither are businesses. They're more interested in paying down the debts that they accumulated in the boom years. Not only that, but there's quite a lot of uncertainty regarding the economic outlook. So real wages have stagnated. Job security might be a concern for households. Not only that, but return on investment might be a concern for businesses. And so the appetite for borrowing and investing or consuming just isn't there.
And the dynamics of the French economy are not such that, for example, if you're looking at the States, you see this kind of rebound. Not so in France, much more cautious, much more pedestrian, really, as an economy.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, not only that, but the French economy is subject to a lot of restrictions or controls that the U.S. economy isn't subject to. So wages are much less flexible. The labor market in general just isn't sort of as able to absorb any losses. The productive structure is quite a lot different. And so, yeah, what we're facing, I think, is clearly sort of a structural issue for the demand and supply of funds.
And in turn, France is very important to the health of the Eurozone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's obviously one of the largest Eurozone economies, and not only that, since it's not in the periphery, since it's typically viewed to be a core nation, ideally it would be the engine of European growth more broadly, but that's just not what we're seeing.
Thanks very much indeed. Brian Biggs there. Well, let's go now on to some other news. One of Pakistan's most prominent politicians, Imran Khan, was taken to hospital following a dramatic fall at an election rally. These pictures show him being hoisted up on a forklift truck and then falling headfirst to the ground with his 3 bodyguards. The rally took place in the eastern city of Lahore ahead of Saturday's parliamentary elections. It's been announced that Britain's Queen won't be attending this year's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Sri Lanka. Buckingham Palace says it wants to reduce the amount of long-haul travel that the Queen undertakes. Prince Charles will attend in her place. The Queen has only missed it once before, back in 1971. The number of people known to have died when an 8-story building collapsed in Bangladesh has now passed 700. Workers are still pulling bodies from the wreckage of the country's worst ever industrial disaster. Meanwhile, hundreds of those who survived the tragedy have staged another protest to demand unpaid wages and other compensation. Do stay with us here on BBC World News. Still to come on the programme, yet another stellar day on the US stock market. We'll be asking our New York business reporter, how high are shares expected to go? Now, the first permanent museum dedicated to the Swedish pop group ABBA opens its doors in Stockholm. Our entertainment correspondent Lisa Mzimba has more.
Their catchy tunes are almost as popular today as they were nearly 4 decades ago. And this museum to the supergroup is expected to be a huge hit. Many, no doubt, wish they could have been in the band, and thanks to attractions like this, they virtually can. With the familiar ABBA promise that alongside holographic representations of the group, you can dance, you can jive. Over the past few years, the exhibition has been touring cities including Sydney and London, but Stockholm will now be its permanent home. Fans have already been visiting from across the globe.
It just is so good to be part of music history, really.
Many more are expected to come and pay tribute to the Swedish Super Troopers and, in their own way, say, "Thank you for the music." Lisa Mzimba, BBC News.
This is the Business Edition. I'm Tanya Becket, and here are the top stories this hour. Somalia receives hundreds of millions of dollars of pledges in aid at an international conference in London. And police praise the courage of 3 women found alive at a house in Ohio. They'd been missing, presumed dead, for about a decade. In the business world, it's one of the most important global institutions. The World Trade Organization referees global trade, and today it selected a new Director General. In September, Roberto Azevedo will start a 4-year term in charge. Since 2008, he has been Brazil's ambassador to the WTO. A big part of his job will be to revive talks over a global trade deal. The so-called Doha round of talks fell apart in 2008, and since then countries have been working out smaller deals. Kimberly Elliott is in Washington. She is the senior fellow at the Centre for Global Development and joins us now. Welcome to the programme. It seems that the WTO has a battle on its hands to make itself relevant in many cases.
Well, certainly in the area of negotiation. I think in other areas, in terms of protecting the world economy from protectionism during the financial crisis and in terms of settling disputes, it's continued to function quite well. But you're quite right that the negotiation function has been in trouble in recent years.
Negotiation in the sense of removing trade tariffs, really. The stalling of the Doha round is what you're talking about.
Well, I think part of the problem with the Doha round is that it's about the old agenda of sort of cleaning up the debris from the traditional trade barriers that still do exist in some parts of the world. And the challenge really is to sort of get that out of the way and then move on to a range of new issues that are more important in the 21st century economy.
So what do you think the agenda of this new head from Brazil, and of course very significant that he is from Brazil, what do you think his agenda needs to be? I mean, he's from an economy which is a fast-growing economy, and that's very important, isn't it, in terms of the perspective he brings?
I think absolutely that the role of trade in Brazil's success will be an important message that he will bring. I think his first challenge, just 3 months into his term, will be salvaging something from the Doha round. I wouldn't say reviving it, but just trying to salvage some bits of it and then declare victory and move on. And there, I think what's key about him coming from Brazil is that the challenge will be to engage the other large emerging markets and to convince them to view the WTO as something that's important to them and that they have a stake in helping it to succeed.
Thank you very much indeed. The head of the new World Trade Organization. Well, stock markets in the United States have had a rather stellar day once again, and in fact they have hit a new record. Let's go to Michelle Fleury, who is in New York, and she's been watching those shares rise. Michelle, what do we make of it all?
Well, yes, we saw another milestone day for the stock markets here in the United States. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, as you mentioned, Tanya, closing above 15,000 for the first time. But we also saw increases on the S&P 500, which in some ways is a broader index because it looks at sort of more, takes into account more individual companies, more individual share prices. That too was up about 0.5%. It really has been this sort of unprecedented kind of run upwards we've seen in the last few days. It started on Friday with that better than expected unemployment report. But in some ways you could say, Tanya, it started even earlier than that at the start of this year. The stock market has been moving upwards. There seems to be some sort of confusion as to what's driving this. On the one hand, you have this sense that perhaps the US economy is now finally picking itself up after the financial crisis, which really began in 2007. But then other economists will point and say, well, hang on a second, unemployment, although it's coming down, is still higher than the average that we've seen before the recession. So mixed messages as to what exactly really is driving this stock market higher.
Michelle, I've heard other people say that it's a lot to do with the liquidity that is being pumped in by the central bank, which is causing, in fact, asset bubbles, and it bears very little relation to the performance of the underlying economy.
That's certainly something you hear talked a lot about here on Wall Street. You sort of go around Wall Street, Manhattan, you talk to sort of people in the business, investors will all say to you, yes, the Fed has had a very dramatic role in terms of its policies to try and boost the economy by buying up bond purchases. Some people say one of the side effects of that is it pushes money into, for example, equities, the stock market. And that's something that's been debated a lot as to sort of how much of this is down to what America's central bank is doing and how much is a reflection of what's happening in the broader economy.
Well, I guess we'll never know the answer to that question, so we'll just have to keep on pondering it, and meanwhile investors keep on buying. Thank you very much indeed. Michelle Fleury there, joining us from New York with a look at what's been happening on the stock markets. Well, as she was saying, this buying spree has been going on for some time. If you look at the graph, I think you could argue it's been going on since before the beginning of the year. It depends how you interpret the graph, really. But this is what's happening in Europe. The FTSE 100, as you can see, up once again, about half a percentage point. We're now at the end of the earnings season for the United States. Broadly, it went pretty well in terms of earnings. 7 out of 10 companies managed to beat analyst forecasts, but there was a little bit of reserve over the revenue figures, which is a little bit of a concern. And as Michelle was saying, look, it's through 15,000 for the Dow. That's it from me and Business Edition.
Hello there. Western Australia has seen its fair share of rain of late, and you can see why. On this satellite sequence, this huge band of cloud affects the whole of the west coast, bringing some pretty heavy downpours with it. It's now moving inland, fragmented to some degree, but there are some further hefty showers following along behind. Further north, very different story in Japan. Looks like another decent day for the most part. That central swathe hangs on to the best of the sunshine, but it will be clouding over across the Shikoku, southern Honshu and Kyushu. But it will stay warm and dry, 25 or so degrees in Kagoshima. But there is some rain just pushing across the Yellow Sea, and I think that will begin to affect southernmost parts of Japan as we look towards the end of the week. But the further north you are, we should hang on to some drier, brighter conditions. Fukushima, a good example, 24 degrees or so on Friday, with some spells of sunshine. Now, as we head down towards Australia, the best of the sunshine will be in that southeastern corner. There's that band of fragmenting rain across more central areas and out west, where we do have some heavy showers around. Another spell of wind and rain developing down towards New Zealand. Couldn't be much more different, though, in Melbourne. Here it looks very pleasant through the end of the week and on into the weekend with 23, 24 degrees, dry and bright with some sunshine.
Invest in remarkable Indonesia.
The first full-length silent Indian film, Raja Harishchandra, was released on the 3rd of May 1913. Since then, the industry has come a long way. In terms of box office, Indian cinema's annual turnover is around $4 billion, which includes Hindi and regional films. Millions of tickets are sold every day, with the biggest share going to Bollywood, which is a term used for films made in Mumbai, which are in Hindi. Romance and musicals remain the most common genres, but others like thrillers are slowly becoming more popular. Bollywood and Hollywood may seem worlds apart, but they do share many similarities. For Bollywood, just like its Western counterpart, the name of the game is escapism. And what better way to leave behind the daily grind than 3 hours of the sort of music and dance that Bollywood is renowned for? But you're not going to see scenes like this on your average Hollywood blockbuster. A little more conservative than Hollywood, traditionally Hindi films have always been wary of depicting sex on screen. Up until recently, even kissing was forbidden. The most popular Bollywood stars are idolised, almost as if they were gods. Apart from being paid handsomely, they're mobbed when filming or out in public, even in foreign countries. Many fans camp outside stars' homes just to catch a glimpse of them. And when big stars pass away, entire cities are shut down due to the volume of mourners coming to pay their respects. The Indian film industry is known as the largest film industry in the world, as it produces over 1,000 films per year. Recently, the studios have also been collaborating with Western production companies, such as Warner Brothers and Disney, to fund the next wave of cinema hits. With increased budgets comes better quality films and more sophisticated pre- and post-production methods. Bollywood itself is a globally recognised phenomenon, enjoyed by millions of people, not all of whom speak Hindi. But despite this success, Indian films have only so far been nominated for 3 Oscars. The next step is to win.